Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Caithness Amateur Dram Antique Society tasting. Uh, this evening, I'm going to continue a series that I've started on lost distilleries, and this evening I'm going to look at the lost distillery of Littlemill, and I'm going to nose and taste a sample of Littlemill that I got at auction, the Littlemill 8-year-old 40% ABV distillery bottling. Uh, Littlemill Distillery was a lowland single malt Scotch whisky distillery based in Bowling, West Dumbartonshire. I remember once getting the train to Bowling and walking back along the Forth and Clyde Canal towards the centre of Glasgow. I can't remember seeing any remains of the distillery on our trip. So, Littlemill was situated on the border of lowlands and highlands from the Scotch whisky definition of that. And its products were generally classified as lowlands whisky. Auchen Torlid Estate, along with a brewery called Littlemill, was purchased in 1750 by Archibald Buchanan from his brother Andrew Buchanan. And there are whispers that Littlemill was the oldest distillery in Scotland, and possibly even the oldest in the world. Although it's very hard to accurately verify dates of establishment in the 18th century, most evidence points to the distillery being officially founded in 1772 by George Buchanan of Glasgow, following his acquisition of the Ochterlony estate, which is just a few miles west of Loch Lomond on the banks of the Clyde. The ownership of the distillery changed hands to Matthew Clark and Company in 1817, and the first licensee after the Excise Act of 1823 was Jane MacGregor, who was most probably the first female distiller in Scotland. In 1843, Littlemill was sold when its then owner Hector Henderson decided to concentrate on the production at Coolila Distillery, and the distillery was bought by William Hill, who launched a complete rebuilding of the site in 1875. In 1931, after having been mothballed for 3 years, an American, Duncan G. Thomas, bought the distillery and added several modern functionalities to the site, including Saladin boxes. And the distillery continued under Thomas's ownership until Barton Distilling Company bought him out in 1971. The distillery was mothballed again from 1984 to 1989, by which point it had been acquired by Gibson International, and production was halted again in 1992. In 1994, Gibson filed for bankruptcy and Glencatrine Bonded Warehouse Company bought Littlemill. In 1996, production was halted for the last time, and the equipment used in the production of Littlemill was dismantled, ending the incredible lifetime of this distillery. Littlemill drew its water from the Burns and the Kilpatrick Hills, and it shared its water source with its neighbour Auchentoshan. Unfortunately, the production capacity of the site is unknown, but as the distillery operated with only one wash and one spirit still, we can estimate that the production capacity of the site must not have been over 1 million litres a year. And it used the traditional Lowland triple distillation process until the 1930s. So it only had one wash still and one spirit still, the wash still with a capacity of 25,000 litres, and the spirit still 18,000 litres. The shape of the stills was unique. The stills themselves were copper, but had outer skins of light aluminium. And most distinctly, the skills had rectifying columns instead of the swan necks that are most common on pot stills. Littlemill sourced its barley from farms in Speyside, and it first turned barley to malt manually using its malting floors. In the 1930s, the then manager of the distillery, Duncan Thomas, made some modifications at the site and introduced a Saladin's box and made special modifications to it, adding double ventilation towers over the drying kiln, making the process a one-off in the country. There were a series of on-site warehouses at Littlemill, which were both dunnage and racked, and it used ex-bourbon casks made out of American white oak. Littlemill closed in 1997, which makes it quite difficult to track down official bottlings. Either an official or independent bottling could set you back as much as £100 or more in this very small and competitive market. The official range included a 5, 8, 12, 20 and 21-year-old, and it was bottled by several independent bottlers, particularly Signatory Vintage and Douglas Lang. Since the distillery fell silent in 1994 and the final remnants of the distillery were destroyed by fire in 2004, the remaining casks of Littlemill have been preserved in the Lowland Group's warehouse, and every year their master distiller, Michael Henry, carefully selects the very finest liquid from these casks to create a limited number of expressions, which are then bottled and released in strictly controlled numbers of just a few hundred bottles. And these whiskies are to pay homage to the true Littlemill distillery character, and of course allow the lucky few of us to taste the final legacy of Scotland's oldest distillery. So here we have a Littlemill. There's no age statement on the bottle, but I've done a bit of research, and I think this is the Littlemill 8-year-old. It's a tiny little miniature of 5cl. Matured almost certainly in ex-bourbon American white oak. So let's see what we have here. I suspect it has probably Paraxat added to give it a little bit of a darker colour, given that it's 8 years old. And it's got reasonable tears there. And it's like stale fruit juice, peaches, apricots, and a sort of fermented mango. And there's fresh mangoes and papaya as well. Yeah, it's quite a fresh nose and quite tropical fruits. In the background you get some grassy and hay notes and tiny bits of citrus sweetness. And there's pineapple, touch of wood and vanilla in the background. The sweet notes become more artificial with time. We'll try the mouth. And it's quite a thin mouthfeel. It's got a fruity sweetness from fruit juices, wood, hay, and sunflowers. It's not a great depth of flavour, but it's not flat at all. And the young age is not really reflected here. It doesn't seem all that young. But of course, it's not all that lively at 40% ABV, quite thin. But I think it's more interesting on the palate than it is on the nose. I mean, it gets a little fruitier, peach, and pineapple, and creamy vanilla. But you still got the grassy and dusty notes prevailing. And towards the end, a bit of pepper kicks in. The finish is medium long. A sort of stale fruit punch on the palate, only slightly bitter and a bit acidic, but only slightly. And there's grass, mint, lemon, pineapple, and pepper. I'll try a little drop of water in this. I'm not going to add too much because it's 40% ABV, so I'm going to add 5 drops of water. Not awful lot of asymmetry going on there. And it gets more like sawdust and dried grass and hay. And there's also a bit of floral notes there. Some coconut shavings, cumin and pine sack. Just going to see if I get this camera sorted. It's just shifting a little bit. There's overall a dusty, musty quality, which puts something of a damper on otherwise good nose. And on the palate, just that little bit of water, it's more black pepper, herbs, wildflowers and wood. And there are some off notes, very hard to place, but a bit of fruit, but not as much as there was without water. There's pineapple in the finish, and a slightly unpleasant sourness. It's a bit short as well. I think the nose of this Littlemill is the best part of this Littlemill. It doesn't taste young, but it just isn't quite a finished malt. There's not a lot wrong with it, but there's also no single aspect that make you jump out of your seat. I'd have to try some more Littlemill to make a decision on it. Thank you for listening.